G'day there guys, Markee here, back again with another episode of r/JustnoHOA. Now with that said, I want you to sit back, relax, and enjoy the bloody good content. Posted by user HTP82, titled, Never ever again will I ever live somewhere that's managed by an HOA. So this is the second complex we've lived at over the years that's been managed by an HOA. We're renters, fortunately, so we can eventually leave and move to a non-HOA managed residence in the future with relative ease. But these are the things that bothered me the most about this particular HOA. The complex we live in is a 100-home PUD. Beautiful park-like grounds, but very provincial suburban neighbours. We don't like this aspect. That's managed by an HOA comprised of board members who are homeowners here. But it's mainly managed by an off-site corporate HOA representative who really sucks, who has an out-of-sight, out-of-mind attitude. She doesn't live here, so to her, it's just another job. Oftentimes, it's hard to get a response from her as she manages other places and is overextended. We have known the HOA to be essentially ineffective and very slow to action. Currently, the HOA isn't setting the tone for safety in the time of COVID at this complex. While we understand that they can't enforce mask wearing and social distancing ordinances, they could send out notifications. As it stands now, there isn't much social distancing being practiced, and kids from different households hang out together for hours unmasked. Said kids also seem to not receive any guidance from parents, so they will not move out of the way on the public pathways when they see someone coming. It seems to be a universal truth that HOAs are inefficient, bureaucratic entities that take more than they give, and that is certainly the case with the one we have to deal with. The current issue is that they want to prune the trees months earlier than they normally would, right in the middle of baby bird season. We've noticed that they currently use a tree trimming service that is really bad at their job and butchers the hell out of trees. I'm a tree person, and this really irks me. In other words, they went with the lowest bidder, which is very typical. As renters, we've not been able to find any type of satisfactory recourse regarding the village alcoholic that lives across the field from us. He likes to play frisbee golf along the pathway, which runs right next to the side of our house, and as he gets more drunk, he sounds like a deranged crackhead yelling and screaming. I am not exaggerating. Since he is a long-time homeowner and is friends with the people on the board, they look the other way and have probably tossed out legitimate complaints against him being a major nuisance. Of course, I'm sure that if someone carried on like that outside of their living room, there would be hell to pay. The HOA, this has to do with being based on an inefficient bureaucratic model, is unable to adapt to changing circumstances, and is by definition exclusionary, as they won't let long-term renters, like one of us, to sit on the board, even if you have the ability to provide helpful, excellent feedback to help make the community better for everyone. Thus, it is undemocratic. We are still here because of the financial reasons, which isn't an uncommon scenario for most people these days. But I swear that this will be the last time I ever deal with an HOA. I really don't think it's HOA territory to enforce any kind of COVID restrictions, except maybe close the community gym and pool. It's definitely not their responsibility to manage residents who drink too much. Call the cops for that. Vetting a tree groomer is something they should do. Attend the meetings and voice your displeasure. Really, it just sounds like you want a more strict and controlling HOA. I'll pass. As long as they pay the bills and keep the common spaces from falling apart, I'm happy. They have no business telling my kids they can't play outside with their friends. Beautiful park-like grounds but very provincial suburban neighbours, we don't like this aspect. Can't help but lol at this after reading the Krennic list of complaints. Right, if the park-like grounds are so beautiful, then their landscaping company is probably doing a pretty good job already. Opie is picky about his trees. Being good at mowing and weed eating is not the same as being a trained arborist who knows how to trim each different kind of tree to maximize its health and beauty. Just like knowing how to give a dog a bath doesn't magically teach you not to shave dogs with undercoats because it messes them up when they grow back. This is a new one for this sub. You're basically complaining that the HOA isn't militant enough for your liking. They're allowing children of different households to play together. This person is like the exact opposite of everything people in this sub hate about HOAs. I think we found Sidewalk Susan. Oh my god, if you just looked it up on YouTube, it's that woman, I don't know if you can even call her that at this point, just spraying down the chalk on the sidewalk. No happiness, no fun, go away. These are not HOA issues. The management company and board can only enforce the HOA rules. If someone is causing a disturbance for being drunk, then call the police. They also have no authority to enforce social distancing. Is this the kind of control you really want an HOA to have? If the person was being loud, the police wouldn't even come to my HOA. Private roads and stuff, you know? They would just say to complain to the HOA. Sounds like a police department issue then. Police, fire, and ambulances have 100% access to private roads and have a special code to get into gated communities. If the police refuse to enforce the rules regarding public disturbances, how in the world is HOA board comprised of private citizens supposed to enforce it? And would you really want the HOA to have that kind of power in your life? They already have a huge impact on daily life. Why give them more power? An HOA of 100 homes doesn't need an on-site manager and likely can't afford one. A manager should never live in a community that she manages. It's a terrible conflict of interests, and people would be knocking on her door 24/7. HOAs are always slow to action. Getting anything done takes meetings and discussions, and more meetings, and 2 months of back and forth questions, and a meeting to vote on whatever was finally agreed to after the back and forth. Your drunk neighbor has nothing to do with you being a renter. HOAs can only employ civil remedies. They might be able to send a letter to your neighbor, maybe fine him, if your documents allow fines that is, and maybe even file a lawsuit. Time-consuming and very expensive. But they can't make him stop drinking and going outside any more than grocery stores can make people put their carts back. This is an inconsiderate world. Any public drunkenness is a police matter anyway. As a renter, you are not a member of the association. The governing documents may not allow non-members to serve on the board. Amending the governing documents is only slightly less difficult than amending the Constitution. So yes, it's hard for HOAs to adapt. Why not make a suggestion about the trees? How do you know they went with the lowest bidder? And even if they did, that may be what the majority of the dues-paying owners, which you are not, want. Very good questions for Karen. Or Sidewalk Susan, as we're now applying to her. She didn't respond to anything, so gah! Why are you ignoring us, Sidewalk Susan? Are you scared? Are you scared of me, Sidewalk Susan? Our next post is by user Paleontologist OK 5060, titled, Property Manager Kicked Out My Contractors. What would you do? I'll elaborate on the subject line. My first homeowner experience has been in a condominium association, and it's been one hell of a nightmare. I've been through it all. Started as the clueless one who had no idea what he was signing up for, been disgusted with the state of things, ran for the board to change it, got on the board, saw the same issue continue, and when I stood up against them, lost my board seat. Finally, I've realized there is no saving the place and moved out, prepping the place for sale. My condo is a townhome, in a complex with many traditional condominiums in a high-rise. We are all held to the same rules, despite the fact the townhome units are much easier to access, and we share the same parking area, with assigned parking spaces for each unit. My unit suffered some water damage due to the negligence of the condo association, but my attorney just couldn't do anything about it, or so it seems. The case has been sitting for over a year. It seemed my best course of action was to move out and have some internal repairs made. Unfortunately for me, COVID-19 came into play, and the board and property manager found a new opportunity to make up crap. Per our bylaws, internal works in a condo is permitted so long as we have adequate insurance for the contractors. The contractors can't work any earlier than 9 AM or later than 5 PM, or work on Sundays. As long as the work is internal to a unit, the architectural board has no say. Unfortunately, the current board seems to ignore this, and their lackeys do as well. As the COVID-19 crisis started, it was announced that no contractors would be allowed in. At the time, I couldn't get any contractors willing to work, so no big deal. I finally got some with the adequate insurance, and they allow them in, sort of. Now, we're expected to submit everything through a portal, wait back for approval, and there's a waiting list. No more than 3 units at a time can have contractors working on them. None of this is in the bylaws. My attorney even pointed out that health and safety as a power/responsibility of the HOA is a slippery slope they shouldn't want to be involved in, but they are. Also, keep in mind what I said about rules applying to the whole complex that don't make sense for all units. People can enter and leave my unit without stepping foot in an enclosed common area, unlike the high-rise units. I decided it was best to just get this done, without raising a fuss, so I got the insurance proof in hand and let the contractors in. I'm not living there, so they can park in my parking space. Of course, someone noticed. The property manager told them to leave or he would tow their vehicle. He then made all nicey nice and said that all I had to do was submit some paperwork, he would approve it, and they could be let back in. He then went on to say he would disable the gate access token that I had given them to ensure that they can't come back. I filled out some paperwork, but I've not heard a response. I highly doubt the prompt turnaround mentioned in the above conversation will come to pass. I've yet to deal with a property manager at this place that isn't a two-faced lying piece of crap, but maybe this one won't be. I don't have high hopes. So, what would you do? This isn't a "can they do this?" kind of post. My own understanding is that they have no right to tell my contractors to leave, to tow or threaten to tow cars in my spots. I am fully paid up on my dues and have never been behind, or that someone can't be working in my unit. I also don't think they have a right to disable my access token. I've not checked, but I strongly suspect all of my tokens are disabled, effectively barring me from entry. They've done all these things anyway, because I guess they know you can't do anything about it except execute a long drawn-out legal battle. If you're looking to sell soon, that's obviously not something you're going to do. If you cannot get in with your token, call the cops. You still own the place, and it's normally illegal to stop you from going into your property. First thing is get a lawyer who deals with HOAs. Regular lawyers get lost in the paperwork. I'll consider the cops option, but who knows how they will respond in this city. As for the attorneys, well, my attorney claims their firm does deal with HOAs. I learned from being on the board and through reading up here and in other places, even all HOA attorneys are not created equal. The sad fact is, a homeowner will almost always be outgunned against an HOA. Firms that defend HOAs are able to do that and only that, so they know that part of the law well. There are few lawyers that are specialized in dealing with HOAs, and likely none that make it their entire practice area. If you don't want to be outgunned, look at big law as an option, but it will cost you. The major firms have near unlimited resources, for which you will pay, but you will outgun the HOA. If there is a settlement conference, the HOA may have one lawyer and a paralegal. With big law, you can have as many as you can afford sit there and look intimidating. It's an expensive strategy, which may or may not be the most effective strategy. I'm thinking if I had that sort of money, I'd just sell the place to an as-is seller and be done with it. Instead, I'll have to consider foreclosure as a pricey option of last resort. It is normally illegal to stop you from going into your property. This is true. You still own your place, and barring you from entering your building is illegal unless there are very specific reasons, e.g. unlivable conditions determined by the state, foreclosure, natural disaster, crime scene, restraining orders, etc. The property is arguably uninhabitable, but that's not a position the HOA would want to take. The state of the place is due to their lack of maintenance or exterior, common element walls. Well, in that case, you might also consider a city and county building inspection to be performed. A formal one, not just a quick look-see, but one with full paperwork that is sealed by private notary. This will turn the screws a bit for the HOA. Some good advice here is posted by Crimson7. 0. I'm not a lawyer. 1. Test your access. If it doesn't work, call the non-emergency number for the police and advise them that you're being unlawfully restricted from gaining entry to your property. 2. Advise your contractor that he can park in your space, and if anyone attempts to have him towed, to call the emergency number. Write this in a letter and have the contractor tape it to his window with your cellular phone number on the paper for contact. If they tow, it is theft. The tow truck driver will be personally liable and criminally liable too if he tows the truck. 3. Record any and all contact with the HOA. What was said, by who, and when. That property manager is personally liable for restricting your access to the property if he did. Proving it without recordings, video, or detailed notes, preferably with witnesses, is hard. If he did restrict your access to the property, it gives weight to your argument that he took it upon himself to cause this problem for you, making him personally liable for the situation. Notice the liable usage? If they are going to play dirty, so should you. Go to small claims court and file a suit against any individual involved in the process of blocking you from maintaining or accessing your property. Make the suit for the maximum amount allowed in that court, usually between $5,000 and $20,000. This will get their attention and make sure they understand that you are beyond tired of their stupid games. Once the suits are filed, post them to whatever community board is available, be it bulletin, webpage, Facebook group, whatever, so that all residents are aware of the suits and the reason for the suits. This is not libel. The court case is a public record. When they don't bother to show up to court to answer for their stupidity, you get a default win. What state is this in? Georgia, where it seems HOAs can do anything they want, the owner loses, the HOA and crooked management firms win. Our next post is by user Hickatul, titled, How to Get Rid of an HOA. A good friend of mine has about 4 years ago inherited the house of his grandparents. He decided to live there for the time being till he has decided what to do with the house. He grew up in it, so he did not really want to sell it. Not even a week after he moved in, he got a visit from a neighborhood committee. They said they are the 3 board members of the HOA and are here so he can sign his membership papers. They were extremely nosy and rude. For example, one tried to get into the garage without so much as asking. When he stopped him and asked him where he wanted to go, he had the audacity to say, "I need to check your garage, if everything is in order. I have a right to do this bi-weekly, and denying me access is an offense that will cost a fine." He then had enough of their audacity and kicked them out of the house. While doing so, one of the board members shoved some papers into his face and told him he needed to sign this right now. He had been living there a week already, and these papers had to be signed before moving in. Once they were gone, he took a look at the papers. They were fudging ridiculous, and gave the HOA rights that were simply unfrickin' real. They had, for example, a right to visit your home bi-weekly, and check things like that you do not use the garage for storage, don't have gasoline on containers in your garage, same goes for gas. You had to mow your lawn every week, snow had to be shoveled every 2 hours when it snowed, starting at 5 o'clock in the morning. You could not park more than 1 car on your grounds, except inside the garage, and a ton of other bullcrap. A few days later, they came back, and asked him why he didn't sign the papers yet. They also wanted to check the garage again. This time, he would not even let them in, and told them that he would never become a member of their stupid club. To them, that meant war. Within a week, they had sent him fines north of $1,000. Some of them were for denying them access to his home, each worth $250. My friend simply did not take them seriously, and used their stupid letters to help fire his grill. Then came the day where they went extremely too far. He came back, and one of the board members had broken into his garage, stood in it, and was writing things down on his notepad. But that was not even the worst part. He had 2 beautiful oak trees in front of his house. They had been planted by his great-grandparents when they were newlyweds and moved into the house. The HOA was in the process of taking them down. Tree law! Tree law! They had called a professional crew for this. One was already so damaged, basically all the twigs were already down, that it was just a stump that was left. The other one they had just started with. He fudging lost it. He told the tree crew to stop right the hell now, and explained to them that he was the owner, and what they did was highly illegal. They had no idea, since the board member claimed these trees were in violation of the rules, since supposedly too many leaves went into the neighbor's garden. He had told them that that was no legal reason to put them down, but the board member claimed I had given my okay because the trees were in violation of the rules of the HOA. He looked it up later. They actually had a bylaw that if a garden produces more than one 40-litre sack of leaves within 2 weeks, the garden owner needs to take down the offending trees within 2 weeks. He told them he would overlook them trespassing if they would be witnesses in court for him. Then he called the cops on the board members for trespassing, breaking and entering. They'd actually used a bolt cutter to get into the garage, and he'd always had it closed with a big fudging bike lock after they had tried to get in twice before. The trial must have been glorious. Not only did they have to repay him for the lock and the tree, which was worth a crap ton of money, north of $50,000 if I remember right, plus damages for the second tree. He had a professional tree person look at it so all the damage healed properly, which alone cost nearly $1,000. But these idiots actually thought the trial would have been unfair, and tried to fight it, which probably cost them an additional $10,000 to $15,000 in lawyers and court costs. All in all, this trial must have cost them over $120,000. Then he went to civil court and sued them for emotional damage. He told them how much the trees meant to him, since his great-grandparents had planted them with seeds from the home country. He really laid it on as thick as he could. Plus, he felt threatened by the HOA, and can hardly sleep because he always feared they try to get into his house. The court actually bought it and gave him $500,000 plus the costs for a state-of-the-art alarm system, so he can feel safe again in his own home. So, put all together, he cost the HOA nearly $750,000. They had to file for bankruptcy and get a person to check the books so my friend would get his money. The best is for last. The mediator found out that these 3 pricks had been defrauding the HOA for well over 10 years, and were giving out as many fines as they possibly could so they could use it to bolster their income. All 3 had to sell their houses, so they could pay out my friend. Now he is for most people one of their favorite people living there, and he constantly gets invited over for grilling and whatnot. You see, most people never wanted the HOA in the first place, but the board member practically forced them to sign the contract, claiming it would not be optional, and if they did not sign before moving in, it would be a $500 fine. Only 6 of the over 50 members actually wanted this HOA, and people think that they did get part of the action as rewards for spying out their neighbors to find violations. So basically, if you don't sign papers agreeing to let the HOA have authority over you, they can't fine you because they don't have the authority over you, right? They said it's mandatory for you to volunteer your signature for this. Screw that. There is something called a deed restriction that can require you to join the HOA when buying the house, but that would come into play when the house was bought and transferred. Such restrictions usually only exist when the house is part of a subdivision where an HOA was set up before the house was ever sold. Assuming the story is accurate, there was no deed restriction on the property, so the HOA had to use hard sale tactics to get people to sign. OP says, the reason there wasn't one was that he inherited the house, a case for which they had no bylaws saying you have to join or join automatically, which they had ion cases where you buy a property there. Guess they meant no cases, but okay. Though I do not really understand how it can be legal to force someone to join for any reason. Doesn't one of the amendments guarantee freedom of association? If there was a deed restriction, inheritance would not matter. The deed would require membership. You don't inherit a house, you inherit a deed to a house. As for freedom of association, you are not required to buy a house with an HOA, so buy a different house if you don't want one. In cases of inheritance, they'd tell you to just sell the house if you attempted a legal challenge to the deed restriction. I guess then his Grams was never a member in the first place. Need to ask him for that detail, but as far as I remember, it had to do with the fact that he inherited it. It's actually a requirement on the seller. He signed a contract agreeing that he would only sell to the people who signed the HOA membership contract. As such, people who buy the house sign the contract first, then the house contract, and are now also beholden to only sell to others. But I have seen that they cannot enforce this when a house is inherited by a last will and testament of the previous owner. HOA membership is contractual and cannot be willed. It does not follow the house or the land, unless the HOA actually owns the land and you merely lease the land from them. The house itself may be willed, but not the land, since the person who died didn't own the land. then it's a done battle because they can enforce some rules, but not others. Rules pertaining to use of the land fall under regular landlord and tenant laws can be enforced, but others that don't pertain specifically to the property they live on can't. And in regards to the part where they're in the garage, sounds like a good time to clean my shotgun. OP says, bwahahaha. But no joke, looking for illegal firearms was one of the reasons they claimed why they did this. Plus, people stockpiling gasoline and gas in there, creating a fire hazard and other ridiculous crap. Believe me, there was so much more bullcrap I did not even mention, like demanding that your lawn must always be perfectly watered, but you could get fined for consuming too much communal water. Basically a catch-22, of which they had quite a few to make money. There's no way they would be able to tell if someone's guns were legal or not just by looking. Also, how did they expect you to mow your lawns without a gas can to fill the mower with? Easy. Put your mower on a trailer, which you're not allowed to store on your property, and tow it to the gas station. I know, I'm aware of how utterly ridiculous their arguments are, especially since even these reasons should not grant you a right to get into other people's properties. Imagine that there are some expensive power tools in there, and they're gone when you come home since they left the garage open after they could not close it after breaking the lock. G'day there guys, Outro Markee here. Just wanted to say thank you so much for watching today's episode. I hope you really enjoyed it. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it. Now with that said, we have some special mentions. Everyone that signed up for my Patreon, everyone that's a channel member, you guys all know who you are. I'm going to start putting you on screen in the near future. Sorry, I'm very lazy, but I do love each and every one of you and you all know that. If you want to join, there is links down in the description below. If you want to be a channel member, there's a join button next to subscribe. It helps me out immensely. Also, I have a second channel that does memes. It's called Markee 2. It should be on screen here now. If you like memes and you want to laugh with me, it's some not so politically correct content all the time. Hope you enjoy it. Click on the screen, subscribe, and enjoy the memes. That's all I have for today, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.